Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mike's, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I'm Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Howdy.
Ruben Bressler.
How you doing? I'm ready for this one.
Hanging in there. So we talked last week, a couple things. We talked last week about doing the top 10 shard cards. Well, we did that already.
Oh, it wasn't top 10 shards? I thought it was, because I gave you one. So
you did throw it in there.
Top one shards cards. Yeah.
Top one shards. But that said, so we kind of audibled a little bit into a different topic, so we're good there. That said, it also kind of ties into our honorable mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the top comment from this week, and letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 wedge cards. Ruben?
Yeah, the winner this week tied everything together in a nice little bow that was under 240 characters, as this winner is from Twitter.
Yeah.
Nicholas Lucarelli, Katana Soul 2 on Twitter, writes, I was just watching the most recent Magic Mike's Top 10 in the hospital for being a newly diagnosed type 2 diabetic, and saw Aaron had Nekusar as a wedge card, which he isn't. And also saw Teneb the Harvester wasn't on any lists as icon, as he is.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
so get the dagger in there, get the honorable mention reference in there, and of course, tug on my heartstrings.
I was a little bummed that we couldn't do the shards, because I was planning on planting a wedge in there, like just for consistency's sake. Right. And I was like, damn, I can't do that.
Yeah, we get on a whole joke and everything, but it turns out we did that already. Teneb the Harvester, for those who don't know, is a wedge card, a white, green, and a black, and 3 generic mana, originally printed in Planar Chaos. It is a 6/6 legendary rare dragon. As flying, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may pay a black and 2 generic mana. If you do, but target creature card from your graveyard, or from a graveyard rather, onto the battlefield under your control. This was a gigantic bomb in Limited, absolutely huge, hard to stop. I think did it see like a hair play, just for like a
competitive
minute?
Standard play. Yeah, there was a junk deck. Mm-hmm. There was also a Glittering Wish deck that used to play this.
You'll find an article on the mothership from me about playing Glittering Wish Control.
Well, you really would if you could find anything on that website.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Good luck. That sucks.
I'm sure it's on the internet.
It's somewhere. It's fine. Nicholas, we do appreciate you being a part of the show. Please contact Erin on social media before she blocks you on all of them.
Now, the winner came from Twitter this week, Aaron.
It
now,
did.
I don't know if you know this.
It's fine.
Oh, okay. This is fine? Okay.
Absolutely.
I didn't know if you were aware,
but
you have an extensive block list.
Quite extensive.
On Twitter.com.
I think last time I checked, it was like 17,000.
Jeez. Thanks again.
1,000? Wow.
Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway, and stay tuned for our top 10 list this week, and maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. So, we are talking about Clerics. There are over 400 Clerics.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
It took a hot minute to go through all these Clerics.
See, Cleric was a creature type that was a lot more popular to put on cards, I feel like, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I feel like they printed a lot more Clerics back in the day than they have been recently at the current clip.
And there were also more cards that specifically called for them, where it's like tap a Cleric, give a Cleric something, whereas nowadays it's not a creature type that you see really catered to.
Right. The Onslaught block really kind of went all in for Clerics, but they all kind of sucked, so that, it was, the Goblins got all the good cards, essentially, and the zombies. But yeah, there are a lot of Clerics, a ton of old Clerics. Like Order of Lightbeer was a Cleric? I was like, what?
Some of the Pump Knights were Pump Clerics, turns out.
Night of the Ebon Hand or whatever. I was like, holy cow, man. I had no idea that was a Cleric, so that was really cool.
Spread the gospel, just pump you up.
That's right.
But you'd also see weird stuff, like in Invasion, there's a blue and a white creature that taps to prevent a damage or taps to deal 1 damage to a target player or creature. And I was like, holy, what in the world kind of color pie violation are we in right now?
I have several color pie violations online.
Yeah, they put Cleric on a bunch of non sequitur anachronistic stuff, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I've got a couple anachronisms on my list. So.
All right, then. Aaron, you want to kick us off with your number 10?
Yeah, so this is a card that I'm really excited about. It hasn't come out yet. It's going to be an M21, and I may even talk about it in our M21 episode, but it has the word graveyard in it, and you know how that goes. If there's a card with graveyard, I'm getting tagged in it. My number 10 is Archfiend's Vessel. So Archfiend's Vessel is 1 black. It's a creature type human cleric with lifelink, 1 power and 1 toughness. It says when Archfiend's Vessel enters the battlefield, if it entered from your graveyard, or if you cast it from your graveyard, exile it. If you do, create a 5/5 black demon creature token with flying. So there's something here. People are trying to find exactly how you're going to abuse this. I've seen some talk of Unearth, where you can pay just 1 black and get yourself a 5/5 black demon with flying, and it has lifelink. So I'm anxious to see what people do with it. If anyone has any suggestions, feel free to send them to me, because I think we're on track to get into the early access event, and this is a card that I would absolutely play with if we were invited.
Luris of the Dream Den is really fun with this. Just
that's good.
Just play a 5/5. Just thanks, guys.
Luris is a nice one. I was thinking like another one would be Claim to Fame, which is legal in a more recent format. I think that's in. I mean, it's modern.
I certainly don't knock the idea of including super duper new cards, because Wizards has just been pushing and pushing and pushing these things. Like, this card's super dope and really exciting. Could do a lot of really cool things. Yeah. Ruben, what's number 10?
My number 10 is a card type land. Because it is one of the most cleric-y cleric cards that has ever been printed. And it actually was a centerpiece of a combo deck that you could basically do with only clerics, which was Cephalid Life. My number 10 is Starlit Sanctum.
Oh.
Starlit Sanctum is an uncommon from Onslaught. It is a land that taps for a colorless, and it has 2 activated
land.
It's an actual land.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cheater.
It has the word cleric on it 4 times.
It's got clerics, I guess.
But it's not a cleric. Okay.
Pay 1 white mana, tap and sacrifice a cleric creature. You gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. Or pay a black and tap and sacrifice a cleric creature. Target player loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. Just like one of the biggest payoffs for the cleric archetype in all of Onslaught draft, and also found its way into old Legacy back in the mid-2000s in the Cephalid Life deck that also had a couple of clerics that you could combo off with, specifically Shaman N-Core, which was one of the N-Core creatures that could redirect damage for 0 mana. That was a core cleric shaman. And Daru Spiritualist, which was a Scourge creature that whenever it became a target of a spell or ability, it got a bigger toughness. And basically what you do is you target its toughness until it was infinitely large, sacrifice it to either Worthy Cause or Starlit Sanctum, and then you just win at that point because you have infinite life. Deck never really was great. Like, it wasn't good. But it could get people out of nowhere, and I mean, it's just an interesting card.
So, for my number 10, and I assure you it has nothing to do with what's going on lately. I love white weenie creatures. I enjoyed the white weenie archetype. I played white weenie all the time, and when I got into Magic, it was around the Mirrodin period. White weenie was total trash. Literally got laughed at regionals for playing pacifism, and then I killed the guy. It was great. It was like, who plays that card? I don't know.
Pacifism gets violent.
Right. Lethal. No blocks. Thanks. Nice deck. But when they were previewing new cards from Champions of Kamigawa, I got super excited. One, because the Samaru was in there. That was a very hard push at the time. These days, it's like a common, maybe an uncommon. But there was also this incredible card called 8.5 Tails that looks super duper dope, does a bunch of awesome stuff. One of the coolest white weenie creatures ever printed. It's 2 white for a 2/2 rare legendary Fox Cleric. And for a white and a generic mana, target permanent you control gains protection from white until end of turn. And for 1 generic mana, target spell or permanent becomes white until end of turn. This gives you protection from basically everything as long as you have the mana to pay for it, whether it's spells or it's permanents. I don't care if they're trying to strip mine you. You turn that strip mine into the white thing. This thing has protection from white. Go home. 8.5 Tails is dope. Super dope.
Yeah. Really excellent card. I mean, for a long time, this was the most popular mono white commander. Really, just like it kind of what you want in the mid to late game in your white weenie deck, because it's a great mana sink that protects your tiny creatures.
I have had the fortune of working with people who have either gone to the mothership or even done artwork for Wizards. And through ways and means, at one time I was given the 8.5 tail statue. Like, they made really cool statues in Kamigawa of some of the legendary characters. And I got to work with a guy named Daniel Holt, who currently works at Wizards of the Coast. Who, he kind of ascended into Wizards as a graphic designer, and he was my graphic designer for like a year and a half or so. And so we both love Kamigawa hugely, and so as one of his parting gifts, I got to give him the statue of 8.5 tails. As far as I know,
he also has a deck box. Like, didn't he recently tweet a deck box that had been like customized somehow?
I didn't see it, but I totally believe it.
Yeah, it was in Kamigawa flavor.
Yeah. And far as I know, at his desk at Wizards is the 8.5 tails statue. So that's really cool. Let's move on here to number 9. Aaron, what you got?
And number 9 is another M21 card that I'm really, really excited about. White's been struggling a little bit lately, particularly when it comes to things like ramp and card draw. And so this is another attempt at giving White card draw, particularly in Commander. I don't know if this will be good enough for any competitive formats, but this is absolutely going in my Queen Marchesa deck. My number 9 is Mangara the Diplomat. So Mangara is 3 colorless and a white. He's a legendary creature, human cleric with lifelink, 2 power, 4 toughness. Whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more, what else would you attack with? If 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you and or planeswalkers you control, draw a card. And whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, draw a card. And so this has the potential to be really big. Mangara has been a character in the lore for a long time. Mangara of Corindor is a card that still sees play on Death and Taxes strategies. We've seen things like Mangara's Equity, Mangara's Blessing, Mangara's Tome. And so to see this character come back is very refreshing. And the minute I saw this, I was like, Queen Marchesa, get in there.
Yep. One of the major figures in the Mirage War that sort of ended that war on Dominaria. Really cool to see the character brought back. All of these characters from Teferi's history, as this is like a Teferi-centric set. Yeah. Super cool to see them come back. This is a really interesting experiment in white card draw. As we've noted and derided in the past, and many people have, white kind of gets the short end of a stick a lot of the time, particularly in the card draw spectrum. There was a long time where it was not a thing that white got, which made it unplayable garbage for the most part, and now they've loosened that restriction. Well, it gets card draw, but in very specific ways, and this is an interesting specific way to give it to them.
Like, life has to be more than cantrips, essentially, for a color to exist, and to have card draw needs to exist in some form or fashion for every single color in Magic. Clearly, they didn't think that way, many years ago, but they've kind of come around to it, and this is a really interesting way, and they keep sort of saying, just like, hang on, white's getting that card advantage, and this is one of those pieces that you can point to and say, well, they're trying, we're gonna have white draw some cards one way or another. We'll see if it can get there.
I don't think you're ever gonna get like a Night's Whisper. Like, I just don't think it's going to happen like that, or a Harmonize or anything like that. But, I don't think this is a bad step. Like, I'm excited to play with this.
Absolutely.
I also didn't think Cartographer's Hawk was that bad. A lot of people thought it wasn't a good attempt at ramp. And so I'm glad that they're trying, even if it doesn't necessarily stick.
Yeah. I don't expect Wizards to go too far into it, but and I also can expect them to do things like with life gain, for example. You gain so much life, you draw a card. I can see stuff like that.
Survival cache.
Something like that.
And Revitalize, I think, is getting reprinted.
It is getting reprinted. And that card was definitely playable in Standard. There was a bunch of really cool brews with that card, which was nice. But let's see. Let's take a look here. What is your number 9, Ruben?
So my number 9 is a card that I have a lot of experience playing against, primarily in games 2 and 3. Because people would sideboard into it all of the gosh darn time against my Foundry Street Denizens and Goblin Rabble Masters and things along those lines. I looked at the tournament history of this card. It saw sideboard play in Bant Aggro, in Abzan Midrange, in 4-Color Collected Company, in Dragons, in Bant Megamore, like all over the place. And it's not a card that is impressive. It's not a card that you look at and go, oh yeah, top 10 Cleric right there. But Erishin Cleric has the numbers to back it up. And has the, it was the right creature at the right time.
It's true.
Erishin Cleric is a colorless and a white human cleric. It's a 1/3 from Fate Reforged. When Erishin Cleric enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life. Simple, easy. right?
That's all it does.
It does everything you want to against the red decks of the time. It even started seeing main deck play in those like Rally the Ancestors decks.
Wow.
It's just the right card.
I mean, note that this was also the format full of morphs. So
yeah.
being able to block a 2/2 was super duper important. And there was just, for whatever reason, it was the right thing against the red aggro decks who all had a bunch of 2/1s, and it gained you some life, and it had an end of the battlefield trigger, and it checked all these weird boxes of just like, I wasn't expecting that to be a top tier card, but here we are.
I think I was playing that in Esper Dragons. It's just kind of a way to just kind of a stopgap until you could get the Ojutai plan going. And it did what it needed to do. It just looked, you didn't feel like terribly powerful for playing it, but you were like, all right, like Ruben said, it was just the right time to do it.
Right. I found one main deck, Arishan Cleric. Reed Duke top-aided Grand Prix Quebec City in 2015 in Esper Control. The deck had 5 creatures main deck, 1 Arishan Cleric main deck, and 4 Jace Vryn's Prodigy. And the other 3 Arishan Clerics were in the sideboard. So, here we are.
So, Conspiracy Take the Crown was a cool set, but wasn't a successful set, unfortunately. Really? It sold really poorly. But in it had a bunch of really, really cool cards, and one card that was at least powerful enough to make some number, excuse me, of Death and Taxes decks. And this ability is super duper cool, and they only put it on a mythic because Sanctum Prelate is super duper dope. It is 2 white and a generic mana for a 2/2. We're talking about a Grey Ogre here. A mythic Grey Ogre. What in the world could a mythic Grey Ogre do? For 3 mana, you get a 2/2 mythic human cleric. As it enters the battlefield, you choose a number. Non-creature spells with converted mana cost equal to that chosen number can't be cast.
That is a line of text.
Woo!
You can vial this. You can blink it with Flicker Wisp to kind of reset it. The card is obnoxious and falls really, really nicely in line with what white is doing lately. They've really been leaning on the taxes side of things. They gave us that creature that lets you tax planeswalker abilities. You've always had to pay more for things. And so this kind of gives you almost like a Chalice of the Void effect in white. Right. And it's also on a 2/2 body that is very serviceable. You can also strap a Batterskull to it if you need to. It's definitely a tense moment when this card hits the battlefield and you're like, what's the number?
I think this card would be amazing in Standard. I think it'd be amazing.
Kind of reminds me of Cabal Therapy in a way, in terms of you need to know the format and you need to know what decks you're playing against to really get the most out of it. Because sometimes you do choose incorrectly and sometimes you also just hit the right number.
Right. Yeah, it's weird that in Standard, this card, you're facing down a Fires of Invention deck, and then you choose 5 so they can't time wipe you or something along those lines. Yeah. Just hope they don't have Deafening Clarion, I suppose.
Or Shatter the Sky, right? So
Shatter the Sky.
It's a weird game in that. I love that
leveling thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful art, good flavor text.
Yeah, super cool. Let's move on here to number 8. Aaron, what's your number 8?
You can't know where you're going until you know where you've been. And my number 8 used to be a really popular reanimator target back in the day. If you were playing against any aggressive decks or any burn decks, you probably aren't going to live long enough to pay for this thing at cost. But you can absolutely cheat it into play and gain a little bit of life and also get a decent body while you're at it. My number 8 is Ancestors Chosen. Ancestors Chosen is 5 colorless and 2 white. It was originally printed in Judgment. It is a creature cleric with 4 power, 4 toughness, and first strike. Okay, not bad. And then when it comes into play, you gain 1 life for each card in your graveyard. So if you're playing a dedicated Dredge deck or Reanimator deck, you're going to have a good number of bodies in your graveyard. You might also be taking some damage while you lay the foundation, while you get to the point where you can reanimate. And then when you do, you just get yourself a nice 4/4 body that can block any aggressive creatures or most creatures, and also gain yourself some life in the meantime. And so this is a really, really cool effect. I've never had the pleasure of dread returning this myself, but I can only imagine just how good it feels.
This is such a weird, you look back at the history of Dredge and the things, it's like looking back at the history of Oath and being like, what have been the Oath targets? What have been the Dredge things? And it's
right, and you're like,
what is this card doing? Yeah.
Why? It's a catch-up sort of mechanic thing, which I understand. I recall having this, I think it was in my cube for like a half minute, and we all saw it in a pack and laughed at it and just replaced it with something else. It was kind of silly, but the card had its usage.
Sure.
It's a 4/4.
It gains 20 life. That's why you're playing the card.
Yes, that's why it's there. That's why it exists, and it's a super cool cleric. Ruben, what's number 8?
My number 8 is one of, I count 3 total clerics that have both a Pro Tour win and are presently in the MTGO Cube. I'm sorry, I count 2 with Pro Tour wins. This one has a PT win, as it won a Players Tour in Nagoya in January in the hands of Kenta Harane. It is because the deck was Bant Spirits, it is a Spirit Cleric, and it is a Selfless Spirit.
Oh, yeah.
Selfless Spirit is a colorless and a white for a 2/1 Spirit Cleric with flying and sacrifice Selfless Spirit. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Very popular in Bant Spirits and Azuria Spirits, obviously, but also hugely important in the Collected Company decks of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this card was it's just efficiency, right? It's a 2-mana, 2/1 flyer with a strictly upside ability. And the ability itself helps keep all of your stuff around. So it's one of the best weenies ever printed, let alone a spirit weenie, I guess, as it were. And speaking of selfless, because we got to find these cards. There's 6 cards that have selfless in the name. And the most recent one is Selfless Savior, whose flavor text I have to share. It's a dog. It's a 1-mana 1/1 that can sacrifice itself. Another target creature you control gains indestructible until turn. Here we go.
Yeah, this card slots in really well. On the surface, it looks like something you would only want in a tribal deck or a spirits deck, which, spirits does very well with it, with all their anthem effects and the ability to give things hexproof, but it slots into anything. I have it in my God Eternal Oketra deck. Mm-hmm. You can sacrifice it. You can recur it if you want to. I mean, there's just so many. It's such a versatile card, and, there's a reason why it has the price tag it does, because so many decks can use it.
It's only been printed once, too.
Yeah.
But Selfless Savior, the doggy, says, she raised him from an orphan pup, and gave him a life of love. With his last act, he thanked her. It's just I can handle this right now.
Why are you doing this to me?
Wizards, why? There's the kids. Remember the dead kids thing? Guys.
This whole set is just Homeward Bound, the Magic set, and it's making me have feelings while I'm drafting. And
it's amazing.
I don't know what to do with it. We'll do top 10 dogs and top 10 cats one of these days, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. After gosh,
have we done cats? We might have done cats.
We might have done cats, I think. We've already done cats. But that said, my number 8 here is super powerful card. Saw a ton of play. Not necessarily a unique ability, but a very powerful ability. In particular, because it takes something out for good. It doesn't just take it temporarily, which white and black have been known to do before. But this white and black creature, also known as Sin Collector, who showed up in Dragon's Maze of all sets, is a black, a white, and a generic mana for a 2/1 uncommon human cleric. When Sin Collector enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose an instant or sorcery card from it and exile that card. This was a huge force in Standard and saw play from the moment it entered to the moment it left.
Absolutely. Very important card, especially in those Esper Mirror matches. Mm-hmm. Saw play in Modern even for a little while. Yeah. I mean, it did everything that you wanted it to do, especially it took out Sphinx's Revelations. It took out it could chump block. It even put pressure on Planeswalkers, which was relevant. Yeah. It's just a really good card.
Yeah, I seem to recall there being a black-white kind of mid-range deck with Obzadot, and so this was another kind of duress on a stick that you could use.
And if you want to see a creepy picture, check out the F&M promo.
Of Leatherface?
Lorne.
Yeah.
He's all up in your business and creeping me out. That's what we're doing here. My number 7 is higher on someone else's list. Aaron, what do you have for number 7?
So we've talked a lot about white and what exactly white does, and so far it hasn't gone too far off the rails. But when I look at this one, I don't know why this is white. I absolutely don't. And the art is also kind of creepy. My number 7 is Preacher. So Preacher was 1 colorless and 2 white. It's a creature type human cleric, although it says summon Preacher on the card. Originally printed in the dark, 1 power and 1 toughness, art by Quentin Hoover. May he rest in peace. And you can tap it, and it says, for as long as Preacher remains tapped, gain control of target creature of an opponent's choice. You may choose not to untap Preacher during your untap step. I'm paraphrasing. That's the Oracle text. But why does white have a control magic?
Oh, this was the Wild West days right here.
When has white ever been about taking creatures? Like, normally it's exiling them, maybe tapping them down, but like gain control. What?
Yeah.
Let's look.
And I guess the flavor is that he's preaching and winning the creature over. Like,
that's the flavor. And you used to have things like I think there was a card that did something along the lines of like regenerate target creature, you gain control of it if it dies.
Wow.
So like you're thanking your new friend for saving you. There's a bunch of weird white stuff in that, like right after the initial alpha stuff, and then like for 3 years they didn't know what white did.
You're right. They didn't know what white did. They didn't know what a lot of things did, or what a lot of things were healthy or unhealthy.
Yeah.
And like they had the customer service people make homelands, y'all. Like they didn't know. This set, like the dark was crap. Like in my opinion, from the moment I sort of learned Magic, I never heard a good word about the dark. It's not like they had these awesome memories of playing the dark or playing the dark unlimited or whatever. No, it was just packs of Magic cards that did different stuff. Right. But it didn't really, it wasn't that set that you sort of look back on that fondly. And even today, I mean, you don't look back fondly necessarily on antiquities per se, or I mean, not you don't look necessarily on the dark, but you do on like antiquities or Arabian Nights. These old sort of sets had a really cool like form and feel about them. But yeah, then you had stuff like like the dark, and it was full of weird bad cards that you get to make fun of. I mean, isn't Witch Hunter or something in this one?
Witch Hunter is another weird white card that's a pinger. Yeah.
It's a pinger. What? And Wizards brought that back in Time Spiral.
Sure did.
Why did you? That wasn't necessary.
I don't know.
It was silly. Ruben, what's number 7?
My number 7, another card that has a PT win. This one actually a Pro Tour, and is also in the MTGO cube because it fills a role that no other card, as far as I can tell, really fills. We have a few cards that do like the Banisher Priest Oblivion Ring thing. We have a few creatures like that. There's like Fiend Hunter, there's like Palace Jailer, there's some of those. But very few of them are able to deal with artifacts or enchantments. Oh. And that's where Leonin Relic Warder comes in. Mm-hmm. Leonin Relic Warder is a 2 white mana, white for a 2/2 cat cleric. That when it enters the battlefield, you may exile target artifact or enchantment, and when it leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to the battlefield under its owner's control. This was a 2 in the main deck, 2 in the sideboard of David Scharfman's White Weenie deck from PT Nagoya in 2011, so that you could take out Shrine of Burning Rage, you could take out Opposing Tempered Steels, all of that kind of stuff. Not to mention the mirror match when you could take out Sword of War and Peace in your White Weenie deck, which was pretty relevant, and just a very, very, very good card.
Yeah, I have it in my God Eternal Oketra deck. It's just a cheap creature that will trigger Oketra. You'll get your 4/4. And we're also running a lot of bounce spells. So you run your Silvermane Lion. So if you find a juicier target, you can just put it back and then cast it again, get another token, and get a better target.
Yeah, Leonin Relic Warder is super awesome. Just efficient, you know what I mean? It's really efficient for what it does. Yeah. And it felt kind of pushed at the time, but it's just sort of the right amount of pushing. It's just a bear. At the end of the day, it's just a bear, but you give a bear kind of a cool Oblivion Ring.
Right.
I'm down to party. Let's do it.
And in the cube, instead of taking out big
first.
Yeah, there you go. Instead of taking out these big, giant, splashy artifacts like God Pharaoh's Gift or something along those lines, in the cube, it most often is turn 2 taking out a Signet or something along those lines. Right. So it takes all kinds. It's pretty spectacular.
Yeah, the card is super cool. All right, so like I said, number 7, higher on someone else's list, but we'll get to number 6 here. I'll just go ahead and bust my number 6. I've told this story before. I know, right? With the Bears, right? That's the whole theme. This is Maine.
Bustin' with the Bears.
This is Maine, y'all. All right. Look. At one point in time, Wizard of the Coast had a card called Persecute in Standard. Yeah. 2 black, 2 generic mana sorcery. You name a color, your opponent discards all cards of that color.
2 times in Standard, as a matter of fact. Initially in Urza Saga, later printed in a core set.
That's right. And I was playing a mono white deck, and they were playing a mono black deck. And it was, what was that card in Future Sight, that legendary, the one that you can discard copies of itself? Corlash. They were playing Corlash.
Heir to Blackblade.
There you go. And I was playing that deck. They made me discard 7 cards. Ooh. And I won that game easily. thanks to Martyr of Sands.
Oh,
Martyr of Sands is a white mana for a 1/1 common human cleric that has 1 generic mana. Reveal X white cards from your hand, sacrifice it. You gain 3 times X life. This was, I think it's the first time they've ever had 3 times X life on a card.
Possibly.
Because you gained a ton of life. So no matter what they would do to try to mess with me, the mono black deck, I would just wrath the board. I would just gain a ton of life, and I would just start like eating them out or eking them out with what was it? Something Sanctuary. What was it? The ones that make Pegasuses?
Oh, Sacred Mesa.
Sacred Mesa. Thank you. For some reason, Island Sanctuary in my head because it has a Pegasus on it. But yeah, so Martyr of Sands, absolutely terrific. Love this card. Love the deck. It was super fun. Great.
Is this the most successful Martyr of the cycle?
I think so.
Yeah.
They were all really good, though.
So the red Martyr of Ashes was a Ranger of Eos target for control matchups. Okay. All the Martyrs were decent, but certainly this is the one that has the most tournament pedigree.
I remember the first time I faced this in Modern, I had to I was like, "Are you serious?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, I'm also running, Seer's Ascendant or whatever." And I'm like, "What?
What?
Excuse me?"
I mean, it's funny to me. Like, you don't really get these tournament aha moments anymore. We have to submit our deck lists for the players' tours, etc. Yeah. You don't really have these. I brought like humans in at the SCG tour when humans like burst onto the scene with Unclaimed Territory and Kitesail Freebooter was the last time to me I was like, oh my goodness, brand new deck, killing it.
Yeah.
But Worlds 2006, Gabe Nassif brought Tron Martyr Life with Martyr of Sands and Proclamation of Rebirth and Top Ford. This was in the world of Dragonstorm. Right? And like Jeskai Tron or Blue White Red Tron at the time and like Gruul Aggro. And he's like, here are my Martyrs and my Chrono Savants. Right? Like just what's even happening?
Yeah.
And yeah, it was, that's a card that I have a fond recollection of.
The fact that Proclamation of Rebirth could get back the Martyr of Sands over and over again to get all that life over and over again was just such a grind. And I loved it.
Probably the most successful predict card or forecast.
Forecast, yes, forecast for sure. Yeah. Ruben, what's number 6?
My number 6 is a card that is has been very popular for a very long time in older formats. It has been extremely good since its printing initially in Commander 2014, and even got an Amonkhet Invocation, was reprinted in Ultimate Masters and is about to be in Core Set 2021. I'm trying to hide it because Aaron's going to get mad at me when I say that it's Containment Priest.
Oh.
So, Containment Priest.
It's been fun.
Yeah, I was trying to get her to stay for this segment, so like... a colorless and a white gets you a 2/2 human cleric with flash. If a non-token creature would enter the battlefield and it wasn't cast, exile it instead. Obviously extremely good in all shape and size of decks in Vintage and Legacy, and now will be Modern and Standard and Historic and Pioneer legal, to be able to preempt Ether Vials, to preempt... Trying to think of non-dredge things.
Show and tells.
Show and tells. Yep, can shut off Show and tell.
I learned that the hard way. People have been playing Winota in older formats. Like there are a couple of people I follow, specifically Japanese Magic players, who've been playing her in Legacy decks and in Vintage decks. And so I was like, all right, I'll try one of them and see how it goes. And I remember I was facing, just some deck that had white in it, and I didn't think that it was going to affect me. So like I swung in with my goblins, I swing in with Winota, I get 2 Winota triggers, and with them on the stack, they flashed in Containment Priest. And at first I was like, oh, idiot, I'm not playing a grape. Oh.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah. And then I had to decline the triggers, and I was like, yep. So that card comes in more often than Oath of Druids.
Yep. Green Sun Zenith also. It does a number of things, and it's a 2/2 for 2. It is legitimately the definition of a hate bear.
Putting a card this powerful into Standard is pretty cool to see. Mm-hmm. This is the type of stuff that I want to see happen, where you take these older Commander cards that were like, they really helped sort of define a niche in some certain metagames, and you say, well, Standard can have it. And now Modern and Pioneer and Historic and all that stuff can have answers to really overpowered things, Aaron, that you like to do that are overpowered.
That you play to feel something, okay?
Right. You do. Aaron, what's number 6?
So my number 6 is another weird card, this time in black. I don't know who this is for. Like, I thought about it and I was like, maybe Shroom deck. I was trying to build my Shroom deck and I remember I was looking for options and this came up and I was like, I think it's like 86 cents maybe. If Scryfall's to be believed, but it's just weird because you don't think black and artifacts, and the art is also kind of disturbing. My number 6 is Priest of Yawgmoth.
Yeah.
So Priest of Yawgmoth has a lot of tags. I'm just going to give you the Oracle version. 1 colorless and a black for a 1/2 summon Cleric. And it just says tap, sacrifice an artifact at an amount of black mana equal to the sacrifice artifact's converted mana cost. So it's like a black mana dork that requires sacking artifacts. And if you look at the art, it appears to be like this brass man or this creature made out of metal. And then it has like blood pumping the veins into its hand and through its neck. Like, it's kind of disturbing, but it's just like, who was this for?
Yeah.
This was the Phyrexians, right? Trying to show their stuff.
Yeah.
This card is worth nothing.
Yeah.
Weird.
You can get you a nice near mint copy for about 75 cents.
Black has a weird relationship with artifacts.
That's true.
They've been trying to let Black interact with artifacts in a more reasonable fashion recently, but there was a reprocess deck for a long time that was like, we can use artifacts in some way, shape, or form. Right. Or Gate to Phyrexia was another super weird one where it's like Black can deal with an artifact, kinda. Sort of. Yeah, just like, and this is another one. It just like is very, very weird.
Yeah, let's move on here to our number 5. I have a higher sandwich, which means my number 7 and my number 5 are higher on someone else's list. So, Ruben, what's number 5?
My number 5 is, as far as I can tell, I think the most played Cleric in competitive Magic the Gathering. It has a Pro Tour win in Paul Rietzel's White Weenie deck at Pro Tour Amsterdam in 2010 as a 4 of in the main deck, but most often finds itself out of sideboards. It's just another one of these hate bears. It's a 2/2 for 2 that shuts off entire strategies if it is able to stay in play. My number 5 is Aethersworn Canonist.
Ooh, love it.
Colorless and a white gets you an artifact creature human cleric, originally from Shards of Alara. It is a 2/2. Each player who has cast a non-artifact spell this turn can't cast additional non-artifact spells, which means that your Storm deck is no more. You can't do that anymore. But it lets you keep playing your Moxen or your other mana artifacts, not to mention equipment and things along those lines.
Skulls and stuff.
Yeah. So
yeah, this card is a sweet, sweet hate bear. Honestly, this feels like a card that could have flash today. It feels like slide right up next to Containment Priest and make it happen. But this card is super dope. It's weird. Like, does this see a ton of play in what deck? Just a hate Storm out essentially?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's like $6 or $7. So.
Yeah, still sees play in Legacy. I think I've even seen it in Modern sometimes. Yeah. Like, it just creeps up. So it's one of those cards you have to remind yourself exists, where you're like, that's a card.
Well, I got to answer it too.
I'll see it a lot of the time out of the sideboard of Death and Taxes, just generic Stoneblade kind of decks, but also out of, Bogles or Affinity or Death Shadow, just like stuff that, they want to sideboard in an answer that is still a creature so that they can still Miracles. Keep doing what they want.
Yeah.
I remember when I was learning how to play Ad Nauseam in Modern, this was like Ad Nauseam 1-on-1, where it's like, what are you going to do if you see an Aethersworn Canonist? And I remember having to like prepare for cards like this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to note, this is a human.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an Esper human.
I also think it looks kind of like Christine Sprinkle. Like, every time Christine Sprinkle posts these tweets, she's like, what should I cosplay next? I'm always the first one that's like, Aethersworn Canonist. And she was like, I can't bend plastic. Like, I don't know what to do. But every time I look at this, I just immediately think of her.
That's dope. Aaron, what's your number 5?
My number 5 is a card that just came out very, very recently. It's one of those that you have to remind yourself as a cleric. It sees competitive play sometimes, and it has to do with the graveyard, which I love. My number 5 is Ramunap Excavator. So Ramunap Excavator...
Why is this card a cleric?
There's
Why
no
can't
reason.
I say it?
No reason.
Ramonop Excavator is 2 colorless and a green. It was originally printed in Hour of Devastation. It's a creature type Naga Cleric, and it has 2 power, 3 toughness. You may play land cards from your graveyard. So very simple, very efficient. If you're playing any sort of graveyard strategies, odds are that you're going to be incidentally milling some lands, which feels bad. And so if you want to make sure that you're hitting your land drops, this is absolutely what you want to be playing. It's also just a crucible on a stick, essentially. So if you're playing lands, you want to have a nice little body where, not only does it do what you want it to do, it's redundant, but also you can attack and you can get aggressive with it. And so I've certainly seen this card in older formats. Sometimes you see it in vintage even, and it's just, good at what it does.
Yeah.
I mean, Crucible of Worlds is a hell of a Magic card.
Especially because Crucible was really expensive for a long time. And so if you couldn't afford a Crucible, you could probably get away with an Excavator as well.
Yeah. I mean, this card's really great. I'm pretty sure that the reason why it's a Naga Cleric is so that it avoids the myriad of tribal synergies that exist within green. If you made it a shaman, if you made it a druid, maybe something happens someday. And so making it a cleric makes sense from that standpoint, but it is super weird to see it on a mono green card.
It's a little strange. There's a really cool draft weekend promo of Ramonop Excavator, if you want to check that out. And luckily, because Commander players hate foils, it's about the same cost as a non-foil copy, which is cool too. Let's see here. Let's move on here to number 4. Aaron, what's number 4?
I love that Ramonop Excavator art. Sorry, I had never seen that before.
Cool? Yeah, there's a couple versions that are really nice. So my number 4 is one of those cards that I'm always surprised doesn't see more play. It's also from an underappreciated set, but the minute I saw this card, I knew that it was going to fit in really well with my Rakdos Lord of Riots EDH deck. And I've also had it in my Marchesa deck at various points. My number 4 is Twilight Prophet. So Twilight Prophet is 2 colorless and 2 black. It's a creature type vampire cleric, printed 1 time in Rivals of Ixalan. Still goes for about $15 or so. 2 power, 4 toughness with flying and ascend. If you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have the City's Blessing, reveal the top card of your library and put it in your hand. Each opponent loses X life, and you gain X life, where X is that card's converted mana cost. So if you're playing Commander and you've got a full pod, it's 3 opponents that are losing life there. That's a really, really big deal. It also triggers your Spectacle. It triggers your Lord of Riots, which I was trying to do. If you're playing any sort of vampire strategy, this is great card advantage in your tribe. And a 2/4 body is nothing to sneeze at either. Amazing art by Seb McKinnon. I just love this card. Like, why aren't more people?
I cannot believe this didn't make a splash in Standard. I actively cannot believe it.
Yeah.
Like, it's Ruben wild. And I were there at the pre-release, just going on and on about this card and some others. And like, yes, this Phoenix is cool, but oh my God, Twilight Prophet is drawing cards, making them lose life, and just did not get there.
Didn't do anything. It has one of the best playmats from GP, official GP playmats. This art spectacular. I think it was GP Phoenix gave this one away. And it was GP Phoenix because they put Rekindling Phoenix on a playmat for a different city.
That's right, they did.
That always upset me.
Lol.
But yeah, Twilight Prophet's great.
Yeah, not having Rekindling Phoenix, which was the other, the big chase rare of the set that actually did make a huge, huge splash. But not being in the GP Phoenix was a little awkward. A little weird. Ruben, what's number 4?
My number 4 is, as far as I can tell, the only banned or restricted cleric that has ever been banned or restricted in Magic the Gathering. And it is, in fact, banned and restricted in 3 different formats. It is banned in Standard. That doesn't narrow it down for you. It is also banned in Extended, which gives you a little bit of a time reference to you. It's also banned in Mirrodin Block Constructed. My number 4 is Disciple of the Vault.
My number 5.
There you go.
Yeah.
1 black mana gets you a human cleric 1/1. Whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may have target opponent lose 1 life. Pierre Canali, of course, won Pro Tour Columbus in 2004, the famous ham sandwich Pro Tour, with 4 copies of Disciple in his main deck, alongside all of the Arcbound creatures and Frogmite and Mirror Enforcer. That was the breakout party for Affinity. It took over. I mean, Affinity absolutely took over. It was not the only card by any stretch from that deck that was banned in Mirrored Block Constructed. Aether Vial, Ancient Den, Arcbound Ravager, Darksteel Citadel, Disciple of the Vault, and the other 4 artifact lands were all banned out of that format.
Man, let me tell you, the morning I saw 5th Dawn previews and cranial plating was the preview. I bust a gasket. I was like, Wizards, you horrible people. What are you doing?
Why?
Like, I come back to Magic. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Magic's still cool. Magic's sweet. I've got time for Magic now. Let's do this. And I'm like, okay, like, what's the cool, sweet deck? And they're like, well, this thing kills you by turn 4. And I'm like, is there anything else anywhere close to it? Nope. Just this overpowered thing that crushes everyone at instant speed. Out of nowhere, multiple disciples are stupidly overpowered. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. And then Ravager on top of it.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Ravager, I think, of any sort of milestone, is definitely one of those milestones of, when we give stuff for free, it's sometimes a big deal. And I don't think
free sack outlet.
Yeah, free sack outlets is a serious issue, or at least something you need to seriously be aware of, and what else is in the format if you're going to give anything a free sack outlet. But yeah, Disciple of the Vault was just ridiculous and overpowered, and my God, when you saw all the pieces come together, you're just like, how could they have done this? How is this okay?
We should do a free sack outlet top 10. How many of those are there? Let me look.
I don't know. Move on here to my number 4. And my number 4 is definitely a sideboard favorite. This thing started to get stupidly expensive until they finally reprinted it, and ultimately the underwhelming Iconic Masters. But hey, I'll take whatever it takes to get more copies of Auriok Champion in the world. Sure. Auriok Champion is 2 white for a 1/1 rare human cleric with a protection from black and red. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you may gain 1 life. Note that's anybody's. Theirs. So you're gaining life. You're stopping the red deck. This card slices and dices.
Dredge has it. Up until recently, Dredge had a very hard time beating this in Modern. We have Blast Zone now, thank goodness, but I can't tell you how many times I would just stare at this card and be like, Conflagrate, Lightning Axe, Dark Blast, none of them work.
It's funny, because if you look at the original artwork in Fifth Dawn, we got some weird, like a bathing suit, something going on there, and then in Fifth Dawn, they went all the way in the other direction, and they said, you cover every piece of skin with some armor on this woman. Goodness gracious.
My reaction to Auriok Champion is the same reaction that Aaron has to Containment Priest. I'm just like, all right, guy, playing this card in your 75. But
there's always a part of you that thinks you can race it. There's always a part of you that's like, oh, I either just won't play creatures, or maybe I can do more damage from my creatures than what they're gaining. And it's like Sisyphus. It's just not going to work.
All right.
And it's surprisingly expensive. I picked one up for my God Eternal Catcher deck, which I talked about throughout the show. And I was like, why is this $12? Right. I didn't know.
Yeah. How very dare this card exist.
It's such a protection from black and red is so rare.
It's grown worthy.
Covers so much of what can be done for those decks. It's ridiculous. All right. Move on here to number 3, our top 3. Aaron, what's number 3?
You know that when a new set comes around, I have certain needs. And so it takes a lot to get me interested in a card. I end up disregarding most of a set, but there are a handful of cards that get my attention. And this card absolutely got my attention when it was first previewed. I had the pleasure of using this at the pre-release when I played with Loading Ready Run. It also fit in nicely in my She-Ray EDH deck. I think it also sees standard play as well in the Rakdos Sacrifice decks. My number 3 is Priest of Forgotten Gods. So 1 colorless and a black. She's a human cleric with 1 power and 2 toughness. You tap it, sacrifice 2 other creatures, and any number of target players each lose 2 life and sacrifice a creature. You add 2 black and draw a card. So that's any number. So if you're feeling political, if you're playing Commander, you could be like, you, and you've been nice to me. You're fine. There's a little bit of a drain element to it with losing 2 life. There's an edict attached to it, sacrificing a creature. You're sacrificing 2 of your own, so it's a sack outlet. It's also a little bit of a ramp in black, which they don't normally get aside from just rituals. You add 2 black and draw a card. And so this card really does it all. If you are able to untap with it and you have the fodder, you can have a really, really good time.
This card is so good. It's every time I see this card and I'm like, well, I can never beat that. That's just a thing I'm never beating. Right. You either kill it with Stomp from Bone Crusher Giant or you just die.
Like, it's just hard to get out from under that ability once you have any sort of headway, essentially. If they've got the cat advantage or whatever in the cat oven thing, it's like, well, the priest is going to turn the tide there. It's going to give you mana oftentimes to play the thing that you draw off of it, which
or
is
at least return
huge.
Gutter Bones to your hand.
With its own ability right there. So, Priest of Forgotten Gods is fan-freaking-tastic. Ruben, what's number 3?
My number 3 had to make an appearance on this list because while it itself wasn't banned, it got another favorite banned. It won multiple Pro Tours. It's in the cube. It's super popular. It is also perhaps the most anachronistic cleric that has ever been printed. Although the entire cycle of Exarchs were clerics, my number 3 is Deceiver Exarch. It's a cleric for some reason. Deceiver Exarch, 2 colorless and a blue for a 1/4 creature type cleric. With Flash, when Deceiver Exarch enters the battlefield, choose one, untap target permanent you control, or tap target permanent an opponent controls. This, of course, is combos with Splinter Twin, which is banned in Modern, and also combos with Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker, among other applications.
And why does it have 4 toughness? Like, you can't bolt it, you can't Dark Blast it. That's part of the reason why it's so hard to deal with.
Yeah, for sure. One of the reasons this card absolutely ran rampant was there's not a lot that would kill it, and even then it has to be instant speed. Yeah. Why? It's just a cleric. It's not even like a subtype. It's just a cleric.
Well, it's just a cleric because it's one of Jin Gataxius's things, right? Sure. And the other cleric, well, here's the list of clerics. Brutalizer Exarch, 3/3. Entomber Exarch, 2/2. Inquisitor Exarch, 2/2. Tormentor Exarch, 2/2. Deceiver Exarch, 1/4.
1/4.
One of these things is not like the others.
Ladies and gentlemen. Now, my number 3, I was expecting to... I'll be honest, I was expecting this card to be a lot more expensive than it currently is. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Magic cards cost whatever they cost. We're certainly not getting into that conversation. I'm just noting, this is a very cool...
Our YouTube comments still haven't recovered.
Here we go.
It's true.
Woo! Just throw on those
We'll
bombs.
never financially recover from this.
We will never financially recover. Absolutely not. And I believe at least during pre-order period, some people who got this card early may not also financially recover. This card is super duper powerful. It only showed up in Battle Bond. And only did it show up in Battle Bond, it was a mythic in Battle Bond.
Jeez.
Yeah. You ever heard of Arena Rector? Oh, yeah. A white and 3 generic
Rector,
mana.
I don't even know her.
I know, right? 1/3. This is Maine, Aaron. 1 white, 3 generic mana for a 1/2 mythic human cleric. When it dies, you may exile it. If you do, search your library for a planeswalker card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. I think the only real explanation is that planeswalkers are not that great in Commander. Like, they're good, but they're not crazy good like they are in Standard, and that's kind of where this is like an $8 card, which is fine, you know.
Yeah, I would have expected there to be like a legacy deck that used this, right?
Something that sneaks out Bolas or whatever, right?
Right, or a vintage deck that just like wants to, cheat out Bolas, cheat out Ugin, something weird like that.
Right, cheat out Karn, you know, I mean, like, get nuts, like, which is fine.
It's so weird.
Yeah,
it's so weird that this isn't anywhere competitive.
Yeah, this was a chase mythic from the set. Everyone was losing their minds. I recall it was pre-ordering for like $40 or something. Like, it was nuts.
Yeah.
All right, so moving here to our number 2. I'm just going to go ahead and tail end my number 2. Because what's better than 1 Rector? 2 Rectors, y'all. It's Academy Rector up in here number 2. That's right. Barely knew. Look, all I know is Academy Rector in and of itself, it's like this card, particularly because it's part of the reserve list, which is now like $40+. This card definitely saw huge shakeups in Standard, and oh my god, they had a bunch of really crazy decks back then. They bring back a bunch of enchantments because Academy Rector was based in Urza's Destiny, which was supposed to be an enchantment block or whatever, but no one ever thought of it as such. It's a white and 3 generic mana for a 1/2 rare human cleric, and when it dies, you may exile it. If you do, search your library for an enchantment card, put that card on the battlefield, then shuffle your library because mana cost didn't matter back then. They just decided it's free. It's whatever. It's free.
So there's an interesting story behind the design of Academy Rector, which is that initially this was part of a cycle that they were going to put into Urza's Destiny. The remainder, so there were actually only going to be 3. They were going to be the Naya colors. Okay. The red one was removed during design and development. They didn't end up having anything that looked like this in red. The green one shifted into Gamekeeper. Which is a 2/2 for 4 that when it dies, you do the same thing. You exile it, and then you reveal cards from the top instead of searching. And Academy Rector remained the same. Obviously, Academy Rector is the most busted. It won an invitational in the year 2000 in the hands of John Finkel, where you would sacrifice your Academy Rector to either Phyrexian Tower or Renounce, and then go get yourself a Yawgmoth's Bargain and then go to town. It was a heck of a deck. Sacrificing Academy Rectors to go get bargains is a thing that happens a lot of the time.
It's so easy to. I mean, I'm used to seeing it with Cabal Therapy, where it's just it's on the surface. It's kind of like Auric Champion, where you're like, okay, I just won't block. I just won't attack into it. And it's like, oh, they just have it. And you're like, oh, nothing I did matters.
Right. It also briefly saw play in a extended version of, or either extended or legacy version of Life. Remember that Cephalid stupid deck I talked about earlier? You would go get Animal Boneyard so that you could sacrifice your large toughness. Yeah, people went deep back in the day.
Animal Boneyard is a white and 2 generic mana uncommon enchant land from Odyssey. Enchanted land has tap, sack a creature, you gain life equal to its toughness. So it's an elephant graveyard on a
right. So you'd sacrifice your Rector and go get elephant graveyard or Test of Endurance sometimes. Life is one of the most the deck Life is maybe the stupidest combo deck that's ever existed in Legacy, because you would go off, you'd have infinite life, and then you'd still just lose about half the time, because your whole deck is nothing but 1/1s for 2, and your opponent would just deck you.
That's hilarious.
So dumb.
That's amazing. All right. Let's see here. Ruben, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is the only higher I have on my list.
Geez. Well. Aaron, what's your number 2?
My number 2, I've talked about my Queen Marchesa deck. It's one of my top 3 commander decks, and this card absolutely has a home there. It takes a little while to, I didn't read this very carefully when I first started playing it. I didn't realize that it kind of has a repeatable effect, which makes it that much more valuable, and it's also very flavorful. My number 2 is Custody Lich. So Custody Lich is 3 colorless and 2 black. It was originally printed in Conspiracy Take the Crown. It is a zombie cleric with 4 power and 2 toughness. When Custody Lich enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. So it's a nice way to get your crown back.
Hey-o.
One of those heretics has stolen your crown from you. And you can also, whenever you become the monarch, target player sacrifices a creature. Ooh. So if you happen to lose the crown and this thing is out and you get it back, it has a trigger to it. You get to sacrifice a creature. You can target people, so it's political.
Wow.
It also has a decent body on it. It's just a really great, flexible card that you absolutely want if you're using the monarch in any sort of capacity. Or you can also just introduce it into your games. I think I had this in my Balthor deck because it's a zombie. Yep. And so you just introduce the monarch and then you got the monarch, because who doesn't want the monarch, right?
Monarch's great.
Yeah. This is another card like Palace Jailer that's like, whenever you become the monarch, like you can trigger this multiple times. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is insane.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So let's see here. My number 2 is Academy Rector. Let's move on here to our number 1. Goodness gracious. Ruben, what's your number 1?
So my number 1 has been in like basically every archetype, in basically every format, because of how good it is. It just is so unique. It's so good at what it does. You want it in Bant Hexproof. You want it in Blue-White Delver. You want it in Good Stuff. You want it in Tribal Zoo. You want it in Bant. You want it in this. You want it in that. It even is so good that despite being a Spirit Cleric, it has seen play in humans decks, of which there are like 2,500 humans, and yet people still wanted Geist of Saint Traft. Geist of Saint Traft is a colorless, a white and a blue for legendary creature Spirit Cleric, originally from Innistrad, reprinted in Dual Decks Blessed vs. Cursed, which, I'll be honest, I haven't heard of that set. It has hexproof. which means that, it ruins games. This creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. And whenever Geist of St. Traft attacks, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying that's tapped and attacking. Exile that creature at the end of combat. So it attacks as like a 6/2, kind of, across 2 bodies, kind of. Yeah, like, the only way to get rid of this is, like, in combat or with pyroclasms, and it's just a very, absolutely obnoxious card. Seen play all the way back to Vintage. I mean, it was a powerhouse in Legacy for years, not to mention Standard.
I mean, if you go back far enough, I'm sure you can find some rage tweets from me where I'm like, this card needs to be banned because it was just obnoxious. And, you look at it and you think, well, I'll just play a creature. I'll just play a blocker. It's a 2/2, but, it's in a tempo style shell. So they're probably playing Vapor Stag, or they're probably playing Snapcaster Mage. And so you think it's just not as simple as that. And the card just runs away with games so quickly. Yeah.
This was, at the time, one of the most pushed creatures ever made. We certainly, I don't think there was enough sort of a respect for hexproof at the time before this card was printed. And then later it was like, oh my God, hexproof is dumb and you better watch how you use that thing. And then before you know it, they had that mono green guy with hexproof that, power tone is equal to your forest or whatever. Geist of St. Traft in and of itself, which was also, by the way, my number 7, is a fantastic spirit. And it's fine for a cleric, I guess, but like, I remember this thing just crushing people. This was, this was back when creatures were just crap, and they were like, here's Snapcaster, here's Geist of St. Traft, here's Delver, have some awesome creatures.
So, Geist of St. Traft is, and a couple of the other cards on our list are really good poster childs for why Paladin should be a creature type. Because there's nothing clerical about Geist of St. Traft. This is not a preacher. This is like an inquisitor, right? This is like a conquistador kind of, cleric. Like, there's a difference here between a battle cleric and a heal you kind of cleric. And this, I think, is like the main one that illustrates that for me.
There you go. Aaron,
that's my D&D roots trying to itch in. Sorry.
It's all good.
And I'm glad that, St. Traft became kind of a character. There was a really great story about him when it first came out. Remember when the Mothership had stories and they were good? Yeah, I read that one. And then St. Traft formed a relationship with Thalia in the Shadows over Innistrad block where he imbued her somehow or gave her the Griff Spoon or something to ride on. And so that was a nice little callback of like, oh, St. Traft, there you are.
Nice.
Mothership, I don't know her.
What's your number 1?
There are certain cards in the world that you don't have to sell me on. Like, I admit I'm a filthy net decker. Sometimes I look at a card, I'm like, why is this here? Like, ew, I don't want to play this. And then there are cards where if you tell me to play it, you need no explanation. Vengeful Pharaoh is one of those cards where if you're like, Aaron, we're running Vengeful Pharaoh now. Okay, boss. I put it in, and I love the card. And my number 1 is one of those cards where if you tell me we're playing it or you tell me your deck has it, I'm going to put it in because it's fun. It has one of my favorite underappreciated mechanics. My number 1 is Skursdag High Priest. So Skursdag High Priest is 1 colorless in a black. It's a creature human cleric with 1 power and 2 toughness, originally printed in Innistrad. It has Morbid. That's all it has. And so if you tap 2 untapped creatures you control, and this, you get a 5/5 black demon creature token with flying onto the battlefield. Activate this ability only if a creature died this turn. Yeah. So if you're playing She-Ray, you do your thing. You're like, tap 2 untapped creatures. Oh, something died. Whoop, there's a 5/5. And so it gives you the ability to go airborne. It gives you the ability to be aggressive. It gives you a means to make blockers. Aristocrats was a thing in Standard. And it's so easy to get this thing going. And it needs so little to get going. And before you know it, people are just like, where did you were playing low to the ground, crappy creatures.
Now I have
playing
this was a pair of 5/5
right, you were playing Doom Travelers. You were playing, a Verals. How did this happen? And so it's just a fun card. I love Morbid because it forces you to watch the game so differently. You're like, something died. And it's so great. It's so it just makes me so happy. I will never cut this card. I know people are like, it's not very good. And I'm like, hogwash, put it in.
This card won Pro Tours. This card won
Pro
Tour Gatecrash from Tom Martell, where it had the Aristocrats. The Aristocrats was just like the cool
was the
fiddly
sacrifice
deck.
things
Yeah,
deck.
it was the sacrifice to cool things deck that Sam Black had kind of brewed up and whatnot. And before you know it, this card, to me, this like snuck up on a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people were like, this card's the best card in the set, and I can't wait to play with this card. No. This card became one of the best cards in the set in Standard.
People realized that, like, I guess that Skursdag High Priest just is the black Stoneforge Mystic.
Basically.
Just like out of nowhere. Kind of like turn 1, you'd play a Doom Traveler. Turn 2, you'd play this, and turn 3, it really didn't matter what creatures you played. Like if you played a Cartel Aristocrat, great. If you played a Verol's, great. If you played a this, if you played a that, you played the other thing. As long as, or even if you just burnt something your opponent had, like it didn't matter really. Skursdag High Priest just took over games by itself. The long history of 1/2s for 2. Colorless and a black 1/2s that was brought later to Priest of the Forgotten Gods and some other stuff really started kind of with Skursdag High Priest.
Yeah.
And Morbid reminds me of Spectacle in that I enjoy the challenge of trying to activate it, where it's like, do I want to make what appears to be a disadvantageous combat move,
Right.
And so I love finding ways to turn it on, and then when you do, like it's just this light bulb goes off, like Morbid trigger.
Yeah.
Very Pavlov's the bell. It's like, what?
Yeah.
As we turn here to my number 1, which by process of elimination is Ruben's number 2.
Yeah.
You gotta hand it to this card. This card has stood the test of time. We're talking about all the way back from 1999. This is a card that they make homages to, that they create cards that refer to this type of card. They have a card that, like they made a sort of a big focus on Modern Horizons, because when you bring it all back to the OG Clerics, the Clerics that have changed the game, have changed everything from the moment they were printed forward, ain't nobody got nothing on Mama. That's Mother of Runes.
Ooh,
1 white.
When you're good to Mama.
That's right.
Yeah.
1 white mana for a 1/1 uncommon human cleric. It has tap : target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. Note this is before they realized they should not let it. They should not let these creatures target themselves, but they did, and that's what you got, and that's why this card is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you pair some of the innocuous creatures that Death and Taxes tend to run with this, I mean, this can keep a Grizzlebrand at bay.
Yep.
Like if you pair this with Flicker Wisp, it's just like, okay.
And note,
like it shouldn't be able to do that,
Oh yeah, and so for Giver of Runes was the the callback essentially in Modern Horizons. It's a 1 mana 1/2 that target another target creature. Note another. You control gains protection from colorless or from the color of your choice until end of turn. So it gives you colorless, but you can't target itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Still.
I mean, if you're good to Mama, Mama will be good to you.
That's right.
And it also inspired Mother of Goons from Unglued, in addition to Giver of Runes. I mean, the reason to play Maverick is to play Mother of Runes. Like that's the whole selling point.
Yeah.
It's
so
I know
powerful.
It's an insanely powerful card given the low cost.
Yep. So Mother of Runes is super dope, and I am so glad this card is uncommon. It is not a part of the reserve list. They can print this thing forever, so you'll always have a copy for your decks or your cubes or whatever.
Before we leave Mother of Runes, go take a look at the Urza's Legacy, which, by the way, is my favorite Magic the Gathering set, as I've often said. How old were you when you realized that there were 2 living beings in the art for the OG Mother of Runes?
It was just a year or 2 ago when somebody mentioned it, and I was like...
When there's like a tiny fairy person sitting in the lower left-hand corner.
Yeah, holding a feather, writing stuff.
Or Mother of Runes is 30 feet tall. One of the two.
That could also...
And is a 1/1.
What's wrong with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amazon.
And my family protects all families is... I don't even have the card up. I just know that that's the flavor text. Like, it's so indelible.
It's true. And that was our top 10 clerics. You'll see them on the screen now for your review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from...
You got the right list up this time.
We got the right list. It's there was.
Do all of your cards have the creature type cleric in them? He says, with his number 10 being a land.
Mm-hmm.
The disrespect.
Tell you what, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite and win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
Whoa, mama.
Whoa, mama.
Because Mother of Runes was why I... Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Want to go to our final slide here. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, my co-hosts, Aaron Camel and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching or listening, and hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmics. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv @MagicMics, on Twitter @MagicMicsCast, our Magic Mike subreddit, and like the Magic Mics page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at magicmicspodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmicspodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes or Spotify, or just join us here next week. Same time, same place for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.